management. I mean, that's all it comes down to. Um, the big successes are the guys that aren't afraid of that management word. Um, if you're not a high management guy, if you're a planet, forget it. Non-GMO is probably not your solution. You're going to have to become, a better steward in order, to thrive.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. Today, we're talking non-GMO corn and soybeans. As you know, markets are tight, input costs are under the microscope, and suddenly, lots of brands are acting like they just discovered non-GMO corn. The truth is, we've been in this space for years. This year alone, we have over 35 options to choose from. We've got the products, the data, and the experience to back it up. So in this episode, we're breaking down what non-GMO really means, why more farmers are giving it a serious look, and how smart management can make these hybrids perform just as well, if not better than their traded counterparts. So I'm joined by DSMs representing Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, who work with this every single day. And they've got some great insights from the field. So let's get into it. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yes, I'm Mark Todd, and I'm the district sales manager in Northern Illinois. So I'm based in DeKalb County, and I've been with Cornelius now for 11 years.
Hey, I'm Joe Braudt. I'm the DSM for our Wisconsin territory. Run the whole state of Wisconsin. I'm based in Boscobel, which is kind of southwest corner. Been with the company a couple of years now. So,
Hey, Mike Priebe here. I'm in north central Iowa, Interstate 35 and west, and worked my way up into Minnesota a little bit. Been with the company now going on 4 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mike, Mark, and Joe for joining us. So, we could have brought on anybody from our team to talk on this topic. And one of the reasons why we touch base with these gentlemen is that they've got a really heavy presence in their footprint. They each represent, Mark with Illinois, Mike Priebe with Iowa, and Joe with Wisconsin, and they represent a subset of growers that are just diving in headfirst into whether it's organic or non-GMO conventional corn. So while we're at that, and I'll kick it off to whoever wants to here, is how would you guys simply define what non-GMO slash conventional corn is to the folks listening or tuning in?
Well, I guess I'll jump off this on this particular question, but when I look at non-GMO versus GMO, basically non-GMO is a non-altered, non-inserted DNA product. If you look at, as an example, Smart Stack Pro corn hybrid, in order to have the traits that package has, they have to be inserted within the genetic framework of that plant. With a non-GMO, that doesn't happen. These hybrids come through conventional breeding programs. There might be some newer techniques that speed up the process of hybrid development for non-GMO, like marker-assisted selection and those types of things, which accelerates the process much faster than when I first started in this business back in 1983. For me, that's kind of the simple, basic way that I look at it and I explain it. And I think in terms of most farmers also have a real good understanding of the differences between GMO and non-GMO.
In my mind, non-GMO corn is bred conventionally. I'm not an expert on the breeding side, but bred conventionally and brought up just in the absence of any genes being inserted into these products. So there's no genetically modified organisms, inserted into the corn.
Absolutely. And really
Or soybeans for that matter. Yes.
That's right.
Any other crop, really. So, yeah.
Right. And let's not forget to give some soybeans some love, because we do as well offer an organic or conventional soybean lineup. And what's pretty cool about this and why we're bringing it up is because a lot of those first trial results are coming out, and we're doing excellent in them. And as we're seeing advertisements come across the board, right? This is not the year where you can spend a lot on input costs or want to throw more at it. So with that being said, Mark, you mentioned you've been at this since '83. How have you seen the industry change in your footprint, at least that northern Illinois part, from what was conventional hybrids to Roundup, and then it evolved into all the trait stacks. How have you seen it adopt and move?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously, there were everything was non-GMO when I first started in this business, and obviously today, the majority of acres throughout my territory, uh, on the corn side and the bean side, frankly, have GMO products to one nature or another. It could be Smart Stack Pro, could be a Tricepta product, which just the above ground trait, or Power Core. Most of the acres are under that. But one thing that I have been seeing with in recent years, though, there are more and more producers that are saying, boy, the price point on top of everything else that they're faced with in terms of other input cost, where the market is, and more producers are taking a harder look, on this GMO route, and whether that might be advantageous for their operation from a financial standpoint.
What you bring up a good point, and it's a good segue into Joe. Correct me if I'm wrong. You and your dad plant conventional non-GMO corn. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Have been about, since I pretty much took over uh, operations. It's been 8 years now. I've been 100% non-GMO on the corn side. Um, Dad, years ago, back, of course, when I was growing up and helping out on the farm and stuff, he'd grow some non-GMO, but he'd also have some traded um, in, in specific areas. But yeah, we've had a long history with sticking with non-GMO.
So, and why I bring this up is because we want to level set, right? The conventional corn that we offer is neck and neck top yielding. I remember about 3 years ago, C6900 conventional for the local show plot there at the office in Bellevue, Iowa, won the plot, and it was a 309 bush 1 acre, right? Smoked everything else, and in that plot we have everything in our lineup. And so we know they yield, and that's definitely no question about it. However, management practices, are different for it. What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys faced when transitioning to a full-blown non-GMO production? And really, I think top of mind comes to me is weed control.
Weed control is really not a whole lot different. The only thing is obviously you can't spray Roundup and Liberty on top of that corn. So if you want to still use those products, you have to spray them before the corn comes up. There's a long list of very good herbicides that you can spray over top of corn on this non-GMO corn. Um, the big thing I think with like a normal traditional GMO traded guy is, in the years past, a lot of guys only wanted to spray their corn once. They'd go in and they'd spray the corn, they'd wait till the corn gets up 5, 6 inches and just throw the kitchen sink at it, spray it once, and they were getting away with that. And even in the traded world right now, I think those programs are failing. I think you got to go back. I think, with the weed pressures they are, the resistances, guys got to get back to spraying the corn twice anyway. So in my eyes, I don't think, the weed resistance is really, or weed problems are any more complicated. It's just, guys should be spraying corn twice anyway to keep the weeds down. So I really don't think you're spending that much more on herbicide. And I don't really think it's that much more challenging. I mean, you got to definitely go a little heavier with the residuals. I mean, that's a plan. You got to have a residual down. So other than that, I guess it's really not that much more complicated.
Okay. Well, no, I mean that's good to hear on that take. And Mike, do you have any input on that and some of the growers in your footprint? It's something that I've learned working in this industry for goodness, almost 20 years now, is that no two counties are the same, let alone states,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. So I have growers that have been long-term non-GMO. I have organic growers that have been long-term organic growers, as well as traded, growers also. But, when the growers started looking at transitioning potentially away from some traded or GMO products to a non-GMO, I guess what I kind of look at is, just understanding insects, weeds, revenue, but then also scouting. And so I think that those are kind of the bullet points that I look at, and so the insects, a lot of times, there's good measures or good ways to control insects in a non-GMO setting. The organic gets a little bit more difficult because it's organic, but on just a straight non-GMO, it can be done, with in-furrow insecticides. You got over the top, you got dry and liquid in-furrow, you got a liquid over the top, so there's ways to control insects, but that comes back to understanding, the scouting part of it, maybe some basics of the life cycle of the insect, to know when to scout, and then also when to, get timely application. So that ties in one with your original question of the weed control. I think for what I've seen with a lot of my growers is a residual pre is very, very, very critical. We need to understand, getting that on pre-plant, and then also remembering that tillage, is a weed control, pass too. So, making sure that our tillage pass, and recent years here, we've had some tillage being done a little bit later. We've had some springs that are a little weird, so we've been working ground later in the spring. So weeds have been kind of germinating and coming up a little, and then our tillage pass has been actually doing a phenomenal job of killing weeds in the absence of chemical or maybe in combination. So, I always tell growers, look at your tillage equipment, look at your cultivator, understand your sweeps, timing. If you can kill those white roots, that's a benefit. It takes a little pressure off your pre's, but then, getting your post chemicals applied timely. And I think using labeled rates, the revenue side comes into it. So we want to cut rates, we want to do different things, but I think applying the labeled rate, I think is a good idea, and then just getting it applied timely. And so we're not trying to kill weeds that are too big and off label, so I think the timeliness, and that all comes in hand with the scouting. We got to get out there. We got to be in the field. We need to know what we're looking at, and so that we can make the decisions timely. From a revenue standpoint, I think there's a lot of opportunity in a non-GMO, operation. But I also believe, it can be really good and it can be really bad too. If we don't manage it, there's a downside too. If we switch and we don't manage it, we don't maybe do some things timely. I think there's a downside to it. So we need to understand that there's management to it. And it's not really the management, we can, a non-GMO, we can still use seed treatments, right? A good seed treatment can help control early season insects and disease and your early seedling diseases. So, there's some similarities to traded corn too, or to GMO corn. So it's not 100% different, but we do need to probably understand that the timeliness and the scouting, I think, is really key.
That is an absolute and fantastic point. Thank you for covering that, because one of the things you kind of inadvertently answered that we wanted to touch base on is how are we as a company supporting growers that are either already doing this or making a switch, and whether it's through seed selection and proper seed placement, because not every acre is the same and not every seed performs the same on each acre, to agronomic device, resources, planter box options, here and there. And Mark, so I'm interested. Your footprint's unique. It's heavy in the organic space as well, and I'm wondering if there's anybody in your footprint, and I guess anyone else, feel free to chime in as well, that would have a success story of switching from non-GMO crops over and saw different results, and if there's a story you can paint on that for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have customers that went from planting GMO corn to non-GMO corn and have had great success with it. And even in several of those cases, they'll do a corn on corn for 2 years and then rotate back to beans, and are being able to manage that very well. I think Mike hit on something that's important, that I know that I do with my customers over here, is that we do get out and walk those fields. That's important. And for me, I look at one of my roles as helping those customers do that, to where we talk about it, we schedule time together to go out and walk those fields together, and at times we even work Craig into some of those walks as well. But that's very, very important, and all of my guys have really taken that mantle back, saying, hey, I understand that this is something, as part of my management practice, I need to get out and do. Mm. And the guys that have switched over have had real good success. And obviously, I mean, we sit down just like I do with guys who are planting traits, and we figure out the best hybrid on the best acre. Those things are the same whether we're non-GMO or GMO, but that's something that I do regularly with these customers. But taking the time to walk those fields is very important, and that has become a much higher priority for these guys, than walking fields when they were planting traits.
Absolutely. And when you guys are all talking about walking the fields more, proactive scouting, consistent, is it all throughout the year? Is it early on in emergence, making sure you've got weeds controlled, or is there all throughout the season?
Well, for me and the customers I work, it's throughout the season. That's just something that we're doing throughout the growing year. And
I'll interrupt you, Mark. So an example of that with some of my guys, growers, is looking at beetle bombing. So scouting throughout the season, as we get towards tassel time, and we have that critical stage of where we have some beetle emergence and we can clip some silks. Getting out there and understanding the beetles and the form of the life cycle of the beetle, and then the correct timing of maybe spraying an insecticide on at that time to control those beetles would be an example, Mark, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The season, and then following that into the fall also.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. It's not like an Instapot where you just set it and forget it. There's obviously greatly reduced input costs, and as far as the seed goes, if you go with the approach, but you're balancing out some of that time as well, and making sure that you can rely on a person that can help you, give you some advice. I'm kind of curious, what are some of the things that if some surprises that folks have discovered because they didn't walk fields? Is it that increased beetle infestation? Because I know when we plant the what we call the show plot, or our conventional plots near the office, and you almost have to put up an electric fence for the small area to keep the coons and the deer out.
Well, just in my experience, I think most growers have the common sense to be prepared for like rootworm. Especially if you're going non-GMO corn on corn, you're doing something to be proactive there. You'd better be, otherwise you're gonna have flat corn. I think some of the bigger surprises are, late season, probably earworm, corn borer, those kinds of things. Those are all problems most of the traded guys haven't heard in a long time, because, those traits take care of those things. But if we're going non-GMO, we had to be prepared to manage those as well. And that timing is after tassel. So, if the guys that are flying or have the high boys that can get over tasseled corn, plan on insecticide then, because it's not if, you're just when they come. I mean, you're gonna wind up with something. Now, I know further north of my territory, the pressure's a lot less because the moths don't make it up that far when they fly in, sometimes. But, for the southern half of my territory, especially, you get into non-GMO, be prepared to handle those, because that's something most guys don't think about, because that's not a common problem that they're used to anymore.
I would agree with that, Joe. Yeah, absolutely.
What are other things you guys have seen that folks don't think about or are often easy to forget? I mean, obviously, other than increased scouting and,
Oh,
and maybe beetle
oh,
bombing.
I want to touch on your, uh, the raccoons seem to pick out non-GMO corn.
Yeah.
Same thing with deer. If you put it in a plot, those are the hybrids they hit. That goes over to cattle. Cattle will pick a non-GMO hybrid. They'll what will I say? That'll be their favorite. They prefer that over a traded corn every day. And I'll go even as far as seeing that we've seen feed values go up with the non-GMO, and that comes back to plant health. And it really comes down to, I know we keep beating the dead horse here, but it comes down to management. I mean, if you can manage a non-GMO hybrid, it will out yield a traded hybrid every day of the week.
I think something that we haven't touched about on, but we kind of briefly mentioned is the organic piece of the business, whether it's soybeans or conventional. I mean, there's even some food grade options out there, and there's as we all know, right? I mean, when the market is doing the way that it is right now, and it you can't even try to figure out what's going on there, but. Folks are trying to find out what are some more options for some premiums and what are some things that we can do there.
So, I think from my experience with my growers, from the organic standpoint is, um, I've seen some different growers go to the organic side, and I think it really is based off the goals of that farmer. So I had one customer in particular, he's trying to bring back a son into the operation. Land is expensive, land's hard to get a hold of in his particular area, as it probably is in most other areas, but he was looking for a way to increase revenue. and so he had labor and he had his current land base, and so they started transitioning land into organic, and they've had really good success. They have some hog buildings, so they have fertility, because one of the bigger challenges that I see on the organic side is you're restricted from the use of synthetic fertilizers. So they've got hog barns and things like that, so they can get their fertility from that. And to go back to the question you had just before this is, what was one of the biggest surprises of non-GMO corn or organic is, for me and probably some of my growers, one of the biggest surprises that there was no train wreck. We converted thinking, like, in the back of our mind that, well, there's going to be a train wreck, because that's what the industry in some regards warns us, that there could be all these problems. And not that there isn't issues, okay, but I would say that a lot of my customers have been able to convert with really pretty high success rate. The organic side is a whole nother ball of wax, because it's not only about the revenue, in my opinion, it is 100% about timeliness. And so there, maybe one of the surprises that I had personally is just really how fast weeds can grow. How they can go from a white root to like a foot tall, and it seems like overnight. And so you're 100% relying on uh, uh, mechanical tillage, weed tiners, or flamers, or different types of equipment to control those weeds. Um, and so that timeliness is absolutely critical. And then one of the bigger challenges is what Mother Nature gives us. If we get a really wet spring, we can't get in and get those weed tiners across the field to take out our white roots, or even do blind tining, meaning like we plant the corn and then tine before the corn emerges. You know, you can have some pretty tough weed pressure. Insect pressure, I've been surprised, actually, is you know not as bad as one would think, because when we think about the organic operation, we're traditionally doing a lot of crop rotation, which helps with some of that pressure. Um, but we'll see where the organic and non-GMO goes. I think there's some really exciting things in the industry right now. We're working with TS201, um, from a rootworm control, and there's several others in the industry.
And
To
just to chime in on there, TS201s being a planter box option, and that's the active ingredient that would go into a pail that we can put in and help, like you said, with rootworm control. Um, did I hit that right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's
Thank you.
multiple, there's several other options too. It's interesting to me to watch. There's some technology coming in laser weeders. That to me is amazing. Who know? I don't know where that technology is going to go, but if that continues to develop, um, there might be some nice opportunities for growers. To not only, and the other thing I would say is kind of bouncing around on you, Juan. But when I talk with growers that are thinking about transitioning, seed cost is just one part of it, right? When we think about the revenue, a lot of growers say, "Well, I'm going to go to non-GMO corn because the seed is cheaper." Um, that's true, but that's a piece of that puzzle. We got to put all the pieces together. If we make a transition just based on that and don't manage anything else, that might be one of those stories that's not a success story. Okay. So there's multiple pieces. Mark and Joe, I don't know what your feelings are, but there's multiple pieces that can benefit the revenue story other than just seed cost.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Seed is but one aspect of all of this. It's really a multi-layered. I think it's a multi-layered decision, and there's things that producers need to look at, not just seed, but the entire breadth of the operation in terms of weed control, insect control. There's just many avenues that they need to look at, and I think that one of the benefits, I think, when a producer is working, whether it's working with Mike or with Joe or myself or any of the rest of the team, is that we have some experience in working with customers that have made that transition, whether it be from GMO to non-GMO. We've had that experience of sitting down with those guys and watching them talk through their plan, and being part of that and observing that and bringing up questions. And I think for me has been a real learning process, but it's enabled me to be able to help someone else that might be considering that kind of a move.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Something that I was thinking about as you guys were talking is that, um, you know, the feed value of it, and especially as we think about silage and those types of crops, um, there's dairy farms everywhere. So I see Joe smiling. This is probably going to you. What do you have for folks there's a lot of dairy farms in your neck of the woods, and so I'm kind of curious how this ties into that for a grower that's out there producing for silage or maybe has a dairy operation. What perspective can you give us on that front?
Well, I'm going to tell them right now, like going non-GMO. I assume that's where you wanted me to go with that. Was their cattle are going to prefer it. I mean, it's just a hands down. It's remarkable. I mean, you can see it in from wildlife to cattle to whatever. I mean, they prefer the non-GMO products, and um, a lot of guys are real hesitant about it because of the rootworm aspect. Because a dairy farm is usually corn and hay. So they don't rotate a whole lot, once, because their hay acres they're going to keep for a few years. So their corn acres might be 3, 4, 5, 6. I've had 10 years, corn on corn. And rootworm gets to be a real struggle even with traits in those kind of situations. And we're to the point now, especially in southern Wisconsin, the heavy rootworm area. I mean, if you're in those scenarios with 5, 6, 7, 8 years corn on corn, you have to use insecticide with a trait. And if you're using insecticide already, we've had some successes switching them guys to, Craig's going to cringe, but we've had some successes switching them guys to non-GMO. You could double up your insecticide with like a TS201. And then you need to be in managing, like Mike was saying with beetle bombs, controlling the adult populations. I mean, it's doable. It is. It's management. I mean, that's all it comes down to. Um, the big successes are the guys that aren't afraid of that management word. If you're not a high management guy, if you're a plant it, forget it. Non-GMO is probably not your solution. You're going to have to become a better steward in order, to thrive. I'm not saying it's not doable to, plant a non-GMO and forget it. If you have the right scenario on bean ground and those sorts of things, but you're probably not going to be as happy as you thought you were going to be. Um, but I mean, it comes down to management, and most of these traded guys are doing non-GMO practices. I'll put that in quotations, um, already, because you have to, because the traits don't hold up forever.
No, yeah, you bring up a good point, and thank you for hitting it that way because, we cover a whole breadth of them, right? We offer whenever Smart Stack Pro was coming out, we were one of the first ones that us and another company had 5+ in the lineup. Other folks were dipping their toes in it, and the product selection team believed in what it offered and our footprint and dove in to offer a variety of hybrids. And I think that's ultimately what a goal for us is, and really just for me is showing that we've got an option out there for you, right? And it just all depends on what's best for your operation. And that's something that Craig is really beats on hard. I think I want to wrap it up with getting each of you around the horn going through. And if you have a grower that's considering non-GMO corn or soybeans or organic ones for that matter for the first time, what's the most important piece of advice that you would give them separate from increased scouting?
Well, I guess I'll start this part out. I guess because this is what I've done, I really encourage them to talk to another non-GMO grower. And I have found that my guys that are non-GMO are always happy to talk to someone that's wants to take a look at it, and it might be considering it. So that's one thing I always do, and the same thing if someone is considering organic. I've got some great organic customers that really know the lay of the land, and so oftentimes I put them together. And it's the same thing with the GMO, non-GMO. I try to put these guys together, facilitate it, put it together. I just find that guys are really appreciative of having that opportunity to talk to someone that has some experience, and guys are a little more free to ask questions than they are sometimes with maybe a person like me.
That is excellent. No, thank you for that. I hadn't heard that one. Joe or Mike?
Um, I would say, you hit it on the head there. Networking with like minds is always, super beneficial. Um, but even for a guy that's nervous about it and wants to try it, I mean, you can take, you don't have to go jump in, wholeheartedly. I mean, you could take, a section of a farm and put, start off easy. You put it on your bean ground, if you're planting corn. Start off simple. I mean, obviously that gets to be a struggle if you're not doing your own spraying, and they could be some oops there. But or you could even take your traded corn and do like a double pro. And if you're nervous about weeds, just try spraying it conventionally. And then you always have that. Well, if this doesn't work, I can use my Roundup or my Liberty or whatever. You can ease your way into this. It doesn't have to be 100% from day one, and now your hands are tied. You don't have to go that route either. That's one of those things that's you can just kind of play around with it a little bit. So I guess, yeah,
I,
my
Oh,
I
advice.
agree 100%, Joe. I think that's awesome advice because I've had a few growers that have actually done that where they plant the traded corn or the GMO corn, and then just their number one concern is a lot of times weeds. So yeah, try it. There's try spraying conventional. You can, and that way you learn your capabilities too as a producer. Um, but that transitions. But I think if you're going to organic, I think Mark, yeah, the networking is absolutely very key, and when you're converting to organic is well, you're gonna have your transition years. There's a lot of equipment and a lot of different things. You gotta. I'd say that's more of a shift in how you actually farm to go to organic, maybe than like a GMO to a non-GMO. So, um, I had a lot of growers just slowly convert. I think to what you guys have said. I have a few growers that farm half organic, half you know, conventional corn, if you will, or treated corn even, they got different bin sites or this or that. So you can ease your way into it. Don't jump in and then get overwhelmed. It doesn't need to be overwhelming. You just do some research and network with people before you make the transition.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. What's one thing that you guys have learned from walking fields with farmers or by yourself that has changed the way you think about non-GMO?
Well, I I would say it's really been interesting to me because when I started out in my selling career, I was selling conventional corn, then shifted to traits, and now I'm, in a sense, in some regards, shifting back to some non-GMO corn. So one of the things I see is, a lot of times it's a revenue thing, um, but it just when I'm walking the corn and I'm watching this, a couple things come to mind is I think something that's enabled maybe a shift back a little bit is from these people I'm familiar with is the equipment that they have in today's world. Um, I mean, there's been significant advancement in equipment technology to be able to, apply these products and manage at a higher level to get the timeliness that we talked about previously. So, and that equates into generally some really awesome products, good yielding products, and ultimately a higher revenue. So, I guess that's probably one of the couple of things I've taken away is just, we were able to get the job done. Maybe in the past we weren't as able, maybe, and the corn, I love the way the corn yields. I love it.
I'm always, I guess the thing I've been amazed with is that the guys that have been doing this for a while, just how good they're at managing weeds and pest. The hybrids have done outstanding. And as I compare that performance of that non-GMO hybrid compared to traded, it's just amazing how these non-GMO hybrids perform, and oftentimes in a much better way than the traded.
Excellent. Well, no, thank you for that, folks, and appreciate you guys showing up and making yourself available today. I know it's a busy time of the year for folks, and I think we're at a good spot to wrap up today's episode. So again, big thanks to Mark and Joe and Mike for jumping on and just sharing their insights, their experiences across the space that they cover. This non-GMO conversation really ultimately, as you guys can see, it's not new for us. Whether it's us partnering with universities to bring you some conventional organic soybean offerings to the organic corn or non-GMO corn that we partner with, or grow. We're seeing it's gaining some real traction out there. So if you're a grower that's curious to see what's going on and you want to take a serious look and kick the tires around, get a hold of your Cornelius rep or check out our website and get one of these guys' phone numbers, and we're always happy to help you out. So thank you for listening to the Cornelius Seed Podcast, and don't forget to follow so you don't miss any future episodes. So until the next time.